This is Arsycast, and our special guest today is Dayo Adesokan.
All right, let's get started. Dayo, so good to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, man.
I know you're a busy man, writing and coming up with ideas and all the great, the way you keep your schedule is very full of crazy, cool activities of hiking and exercising and meditating. So we'll get into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But very much appreciate you coming over, and we're going to start how I always start these podcasts, which is by asking, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color is blue.
Hmm.
I find it to be the most versatile color. There are any number of different blues that I really like. Though lately I've been partial to olive green, maybe a bit lighter than the shirt I'm wearing.
Interesting. So between blue and olive green,
Mm-hmm.
one seems very, very broad, and one seems very specific. Do you associate particular? You said versatility about blue.
Yeah.
Is that what you usually look for in like a color or a mood? Just like
That's a good question. I think what it ends up being is that there are so many different types of blue that I like.
yeah.
Where, if I was to put together a list of my favorite colors, in that top 10, I would imagine something like 5 or 6 of them would be blues.
Yeah.
Olive green would make the cut too.
Wow. Well, tell me about olive green then. Why, is it because olive green? I associate olive green with usually like clothes or olive green, like
Mm-hmm.
it was a wearable sort of color.
Yes.
I don't really know olive green outside of that kind of context.
I think that's probably the context in which I appreciate it the most.
Except for olives, of course.
Yes. But I don't actually like olives.
Really?
I don't enjoy eating them. I'm okay to look at them.
I became an olive guy very recently.
Really?
I remember I was not an olive guy either.
Yeah.
And then I became one.
In what context?
In the context of I was sitting in a cafe
Mm-hmm.
waiting for a friend to join me.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually in Paris. And I was there with a beer that I ordered. And I had my friend was running late, so I had 15 minutes to basically just sitting there alone.
Mm-hmm.
And in Paris, the waiter, they automatically bring you a little dish of olives and peanuts and chips.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like the chips or the peanuts. I looked at it and I was like, today I will become an olive guy. And so I just dedicated that 15 minutes to eating all of the olives.
Mm.
And by the end of that time, I really realized, especially with the beer and in the setting, I was like, oh, I see the appeal of olives as a standalone snack.
Yeah.
And especially, because I got to the end of the dish, and I was like, this is a really good oily thing at the bottom. What is that at the bottom of this dish? And I realized, it's olive oil. So I did become an olive guy in that regard. But also, I find you have to be very specific about the olives because I don't like pitted olives. Pitted olives I find to be pretty arduous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say. I'm not gonna say, and maybe I've come out too strongly against olives, and so I'd like to take a step back and apologize to that community.
The olive community.
I enjoy olives in specific contexts. If there's a charcuterie board, I'm a vegan man. Very often, there aren't a ton of vegan options on there, and so in that context, I'll go ahead and eat some olives.
Mm-hmm.
And I do tend to enjoy them in that context, but I can't imagine myself, unless I'm having a dinner party and putting together a charcuterie board myself, I cannot imagine myself buying olives at the grocery store.
Have you put together a vegan charcuterie board before?
No. No, actually I have. My cousin, who's gotten really into wine, and actually came down from Canada, visited wine country for a little bit, got really into the idea of putting together charcuterie boards. And so when he was in town, we went to a place called Bestie's on the east side, which is essentially like a vegan deli, and picked up some vegan cheeses and all sorts of things and put together a nice charcuterie board.
Did they have vegan meats? How was it just cheeses, or did they have?
Largely cheeses. I'm trying to think of crackers, all sorts of vegetables.
You hear about like mushroom pastrami or mushroom jerky or stuff like that.
There were meats, yeah. There's this. I know that there's a number of companies that do vegan meats, but one of them, and perhaps my favorite one, is this place called Rebel Cheese.
Hmm.
They have a location in Austin, Texas, which if you're ever in Austin, Texas, go to Rebel Cheese because their sandwiches are insanely good.
Wow.
But they also sell vegan meats and cheeses throughout the country. And so if you're ever at Bestie's, grab yourself some Rebel Cheese, cheese or meat.
Do you have a favorite vegan cheese?
Oof. I don't know that I do. And I only say that because I don't know them by name necessarily. I go there and I buy what they tell me to buy.
Right. Yeah, because I'm not a vegan, but I am self-diagnosed lactose intolerant.
Mm.
And so I eat.
That seems like one of those things that's
Yeah.
safe to diagnose yourself with.
Yes.
You don't necessarily need a medical professional.
Yes. It's not lymphoma.
Yeah.
It's I get the runs
Yeah.
when I eat cheesecake. But
Mhm.
with vegan cheeses, I
Mhm.
find it's a much more a kind of strenuous process of identifying which ones I like because obviously in the non-vegan world, in the dairy cheese world, you can go, oh, I love cheddar or Asiago or Parmesan or
Sure.
So with vegan, I'm finding I have to pay closer attention to like the actual ingredients involved. Like
Mhm.
cashew-based cheeses are usually like good for me.
Yeah.
And especially like Trader Joe's makes a vegan mozzarella cheese, shredded cheese. But the key ingredient that works really well because I like that ooey gooey like processed flavor.
Yeah.
And I find that it's like this enriched potato starch thing that they have in this one.
Yeah.
And so when I'm able to identify cashew and potato starch, I
Yeah.
usually know that that's a probably no healthier than an ordinary cheese, but
Right.
the non-dairy version
Yeah.
of that. But I find like I don't think I've ever come across like a vegan brie, for example, that like would satisfy me. Do you know of any?
I believe I have had a good vegan brie. I think I got it at this place, Bestie's. I wish I could tell you the brand or anything else about it,
Yeah.
but I believe it exists.
Yeah. Interesting.
There's a vegan brie out there for you, man.
Well, I better go to Bestie's and find it. Wow. And so, but you, and when you find, so first off, how long was becoming a vegan a specific, choice that you made in a certain context? Like, tell me, because I know that that's sort of, most of your diet is vegan. But
Yeah.
I wonder, how has your relationship with meat, evolved or
Sure.
or tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, going into freshman year of college,
Yeah.
I went to WashU and there was an eatery there called Bear's Den. And at Bear's Den, you could get, I believe it was a 10-ounce steak with sauteed mushrooms and onions and French fries for $10.99.
Uh-huh.
And I had that every day, sometimes twice a day. Oftentimes I had my classes, Bears Den was pretty close to the dorms, which were maybe a 15-minute walk away from classes. I would oftentimes walk past 2 other eateries to get to Bears Den so that I could get this steak. The deal was incredible, and this was an age where I could eat anything and I'd be perfectly fine. And so freshman year, I was still very much an omnivore, if not a carnivore. A friend of mine around then got really into vegetarianism and was, talking to me about vegetarianism. I dismissed this. At a certain point, there was someone from PETA handing out brochures about vegetarianism and basically, teaching me about the ills of American agriculture. And I remember getting one of these brochures. And as I was walking back home, I was reading through it and just finding out all these terrible ways that we treat animals in this country. And just discovering that, okay, there's some validity to this argument for vegetarianism. I got back to my dorm and I realized that somewhere along the way between getting this brochure and getting to my dorm, I had warmed up some fried chicken that was in my fridge. And I closed that brochure, put it down, and I ate that fried chicken. And so I think it wasn't until that summer between freshman and sophomore year, I just had one sleepless night and thought about the morality of it and decided that I was going to become a vegetarian. And so I did 4 years of that. and then found myself in New York City after college and fully in control of my diet in a way that I had never been before, and decided that that was the time to become vegetarian. And so now it's been since October 2013, I believe, I've been vegan.
Did you notice any changes to your body, your health, or any things that you had you been clocking your diet before then? Did you notice any changes to your mood or anything like that?
Yeah, I think as a vegan, I'm supposed to tell people that it turns you into some sort of like superhero, and like your skin is brighter, you start
Right,
glowing,
right,
and
right.
all of that. I think that as a 22-year-old, when I became vegan, I probably wasn't the healthiest vegan in the world. I definitely remember going to the bodega every morning and getting like a 99-cent honey bun and a coffee, and that was kind of my breakfast for a while. And so I think that, especially in those first few years, I wasn't the healthiest vegan in the world. It's possible to be an unhealthy vegan. As time has gone on, I've gotten healthier, but in such a way that I can't really track the contrast between, meat eating and not eat meat eating, or vegetarianism and veganism, because the progression to getting to a healthy vegan diet has been sort of like a slow journey for me.
Yeah.
That being said, I will say that I have been within a 5 pound range of what I weighed at the end of college since college. So for the last 10 years, I've been within a 5 pound range of the same weight.
Wow.
And so that, I think I owe some credit to my vegan diet for that.
Yeah, that's very hard to maintain, especially in America.
Yes.
I mean, because also where you're talking about, there are um, livestock industry and the meat industry in America and the processed food industry in America. It really is crazy because, and you also mentioned that you distinguish, I think, between being overseas and being in America, where I've noticed that too, where when I'm traveling, outside of America, my diet is usually pretty looser, but I end up either maintaining or losing weight.
Yeah.
Whereas even in America, even on a strict, regimented diet, you can end up gaining weight because of, the way food is processed, and it's almost like you are in America, you are against a slope, and you have to sort of work double hard to maintain
Yes.
the weight and lifestyle.
Yeah.
When you're here,
and I do think that that's one of the great things about veganism, is that it automatically eliminates a ton of unhealthy options.
yeah,
Which isn't to say, you still have some unhealthy options, but far fewer. And I think that resonates with me, what you're saying, in the sense that if you are an omnivore in this country, your quickest and most convenient options for food, your cheapest options for food, are unhealthy options.
yeah, yeah, and it's like it's and what you said also that resonates with me is when you got to a point in your life when you were in control of your diet.
Yeah.
That is a very difficult thing to obtain
Yes.
in America today. And it's something that not everybody thinks is even necessary, Like, especially because I went through a big weight loss recently, where a big thing of realizing not just the way things are processed, but in terms of and the way they're handled or sold or or fast food, for example, but literally the portion size you get at a restaurant is 3 times larger than the serving size that is recommended.
Yeah.
And if I were to write any kind of like nutrition book or like diet book, I'll just call it serving size.
Yeah.
Like if you just look at the serving size and weigh your things accordingly, that is the first way to notice, how much you've been tripling your intake unknowingly.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I'll say a thing that I have found helpful. When I go to restaurants, for a time, I would eat maybe 60% of my meal, and then it's like, I could keep eating this, and now I'm at 75% of my meal, and then it's, well, this is too little for me to save, so let me just go ahead and finish the whole thing.
Yep.
Whereas now, every time I eat a meal, I mentally decide, what is the halfway point of this meal? And fairly often I'll eat to the halfway point, and I'm satisfied, and then I save half the meal for later. And so I'm yeah, fairly often have like leftovers at restaurants, and it's also a good way to sort of like adjust that portion control so you're not consuming whatever this restaurant decided you're going to consume
Hmm.
today.
And I would do a similar thing when I would get takeout,
Hmm.
like a chicken shawarma plate, for example, from
Yeah.
one of my favorite restaurants, Sum Sum,
Hmm.
when I used to live in Beverly Grove area, and I would take it home, and I got to a point where I had the discipline to do this, and I still do some from time to time. When I was really trying to like on a diet,
Hmm.
I would bring the chicken shawarma plate home, and before I would even start eating it, I would take half of it, put it in a Tupperware in the fridge,
Nice.
and then I would eat the second half
Yeah.
of the to-go box.
Yeah. Good for
And then
you.
I would know, like the next day, I'd be like, oh wait, I've got that delicious chicken shawarma
Yeah.
still in there. Because not only will you surprise yourself by how full you are
Hmm.
eating half of the thing,
Hmm.
but you also get to prolong the enjoyment of the meal
Yeah.
over 2 days.
I really like and respect like just putting it out of your way so
Yeah.
that half isn't even like an option and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the meal. There's a behavioral economist, Dan Ariely,
Mm.
that did this study, and I can't even imagine what the rig was per se, but at a restaurant, like gave people soup at a restaurant, and the I'm trying to remember the exact details of it. Gave people soup at a restaurant, but the rig was such that the soup would be replenished as you were eating. And so the control, I think, was people got a finite amount of soup. And then the experimental group was more soup is being pumped into your bowl as you're eating.
Yeah.
And the people where more soup is being pumped into your bowl end up consuming a significantly greater portion of soup.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show, like mentally, you'll kind of eat whatever's put in front of you, but it's unless you make a conscious choice to, to restrict that in some way.
And what you were saying about how your mind works of like picturing the quantity before you and being like, oh, that's too little food if I were to save it and eat it later. Like I'm like future me will be, unsatisfied with this, 25% of this meal.
Yeah.
Which was why I found like dividing it in half right away.
Yeah.
So that okay, this half will be enough for me tomorrow.
Yes.
So
and I know that because half of it was enough for me today.
Exactly. So that's the thing, and it's so true. So controlling that environment is a very difficult thing. So I definitely applaud you seeking that out and achieving it.
I just had an idea for an experiment.
Yeah.
I would like to. It's an experiment and also I think a good practical joke. I would like to go into someone's home. And whatever the size of their plates are, I would like to every week or two give them plates that are just like 10% smaller, like an imperceptible difference, and see if over the course of time those people don't wind up eating less and less food.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. It's like the boiling frog thing. You've heard of this?
I think I might have. Go ahead.
Like, a frog's not going to jump into a vat of boiling water.
Right.
The trick is to put it in the water, then turn up the heat slowly. Realize what's going on. It can't escape. So you'll be boiling these people like a frog. Is what I'm telling you.
It's a very sadistic thing to laugh at.
Yes, it is. Boiling them into a healthy lifestyle. You cited this behavioral economist, and it reminded me you're also someone who is an avid, or I don't know how avid you are, but you read a lot of these similar books of like self-improvement and lifestyle and in addition to sort of I'm sure you also read novels. I don't know, but I remember your bookshelf when I went to see your house is also full of an eclectic range of books. So tell me about what you generally like to read.
Yeah, so I'm currently in a book club. It's a Black book club, and as far as the book club is concerned, we only read books by LGBTQI plus, I believe.
Yes.
Authors, and that's the first time I've used that expression out loud. And writers of color and women. So marginalized groups, essentially. So that book club, by and large, reads novels written by marginalized groups. Outside of that, I still enjoy novels because I find that they are the quickest reads and sort of the most engaging reads. I like to read before and after I go to bed, before and after naps. and it's much easier to get myself to read a novel in that situation than a piece of nonfiction. But lately, I have read a book called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. I think self-compassion and compassion towards others, uh, there's a great dearth of that in our world right now, or at least in our country right now. And I think that everyone would greatly benefit from improved self-compassion and an improved capacity for compassion for others. And also recently this book, Think Like a Monk, which was written by, I'm forgetting his name now, but someone who studied, I believe, at Oxford, was set up to go make a bunch of money at an investment bank or wherever he decided to go, but instead decided to go become a monk for a few years. And since then has brought that message back to the Western world and just like is, showing people the principles of living like a monk and how they can apply to our day-to-day lives and improve our day-to-day lives. I think that I personally, hmm, uh, I personally have had an interesting relationship with religion over the course of my life, and at times a non-relationship with religion over the course of my life. But religion and spirituality aren't synonymous. And so that book has sort of helped open me up to spirituality, which I think in many ways was missing from my life for a good number of years.
Yeah. Yeah, you told me about the self-compassion book,
Hmm.
and I've been meaning to read it as well because and it's so true. But I'm curious, like more about this distinction between religion and spirituality.
Hmm.
I wonder, um, do you think it has to do with the role of the individual? Because I
Hmm.
find that spirituality can be a very individual and personal journey.
Yes.
Religion is by design a collective, a group.
Yes.
You belong to a community,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
and that community has a relationship to God, and you
Yes.
are and you have your practices that sort of conform to a way of having a relationship with God.
Yeah.
But I wonder, like, was this um, does this fold into like a journey of introspection, your
Hmm.
spirituality thing, or was it sort of, to put it crassly, was it a question of being, agnostic or atheist and sort of like letting in sort of this possibility open up? Like, how did that kind of, how did you navigate that?
Yeah. I think to your point, religion is an attempt to organize spirituality, to put spirituality in this organized context.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the issue with that, and it's not inherently negative or inherently a bad idea, but part of the issue with that is that when you create an organization, inherently that organization is going to embody the traits of the people that run it. And the people running those organizations can have flaws, and
Yeah.
those flaws get perpetrated into the religion. And so I think, in general, I think we as a community, a world, certainly an American community, if not a world community, are less religious than ever. And I think that's because a lot of us have had negative experiences with religion in the form of these like organized communities and with
Mm-hmm.
the organizers.
Mm-hmm.
Spirituality, on the other hand, I think allows you to have this connection with, let's say, I hesitate to use the phrase greater being because it doesn't necessarily have to be a being, but this connection with something outside of the, let's say, the tangible, the physical world.
Yeah.
And that connection doesn't have to be mitigated or communicated through anyone else. And there's something really powerful about being able to access whatever this otherness is without going through someone who may very well have their own agenda or their own flaws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also thought of the word faith is
Hmm.
another one that's also equally, I think, relevant to the conversation. Is like, um, independent of spirituality, even.
Hmm.
The spirituality, I think, is also a general belief in forces at work.
Hmm.
Beyond your um, human power. But faith is an interesting thing too because you can have faith in yourself.
Yeah.
you know. And similarly, and you can also have faith in a sort of
A deity of some sort.
yes. And so my dad also has a phrase. He's ever the marriage skeptic.
Mm-hmm.
He says, love is to marriage what faith is to religion.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's true. Uh,
so yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know. It's funny because there was do you remember the Bo Burnham special Inside that he
yes.
came out with?
Yeah, of course.
One of his songs, that funny feeling, has a great lyric that I think about all the time, which is things that give him a funny feeling. One of them is easy answers that give him a funny feeling, and I believe that to be also the case when talking about the universe and spirituality and God or higher powers. The shorter and easier your answer, the more skeptical I am of your worldview.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing. So have you found that these these practices or this sort of new understanding of reading books like the guy who wrote Think Like a Monk, have they had tangible effects on the way you look at the world and the way you sort of
Yeah.
How so?
I think by nature and my personality type and the way my brain works is very utilitarian. And so for a good many years, I ascribed to, or subscribed, if I'm using that improperly, subscribed to this idea of effective altruism, which is, are you familiar with the concept?
I don't think so.
So effective altruism is essentially how to give back in the way that delivers the most bang for your buck.
Aha.
Right? And so I am a writer. I could choose to spend half of my week volunteering at a homeless shelter. As a writer, if I was to use that time that I could spend volunteering at a homeless shelter, writing scripts that I could sell for a lot of money, I could then donate that money to causes that would have a greater net benefit to the world than me serving, a few dozen people soup on any given day. And so the utilitarian in me was very attracted to that idea, and I'm someone that donates to charity, and that's something that I plan to continue doing. Now, what Think Like a Monk does and what spirituality does, so to give an example, there's something called a meta practice. I think it's born out of, I don't know if it's I know that it's a part of Buddhism. I don't know if it's also a part of like Hinduism or like older Eastern traditions. But meta practice essentially involves you sitting down and in the course of meditation, sending compassion and goodwill and blessings and essentially positive energy to starting off with to someone you like, to someone you feel neutrally about, to someone you dislike, and then expanding like geographically to your neighborhood, to your country, to the world. And I think the first few times I did this, it felt a bit woo-woo to me. Like what I'm doing as I sit down here is having no impact on a farmer in China, So it felt maybe a little silly to me. As I've continued to practice, I've come to realize that the idea isn't that I'm literally sending a blessing to someone elsewhere in the world. It's that I am training my brain to send good intentions to people, to wish people the best. And so, for instance, the thing of, in terms of that second one, sending positive energy to someone you feel neutrally about, my downstairs neighbor. I've never really had a conversation with him. We nod heads at each other probably 50% of the time. Other times he just kind of walks by. I don't know anything about him. But in doing this meta practice, he's the perfect person for that, like someone I feel neutrally about. And so I send him positive energy, and I find that when I see him now, I wish him well. I smile, like I'm that much more invested in his life and in him having positive outcomes in his life. And that is going to affect how I interact with him. But in general, cultivating that for people you dislike, for people you don't know, I think will make you a better person in how you engage with the world.
Hey everyone, it's Arsycast. I hope you're enjoying this episode. If you are, remember to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you can get notified every time there's a new video on the channel. Enjoy part 2.
As you're talking about sort of putting out positive energy, and what, and even if it doesn't have necessarily a tactile effect on people's lives, just training your mind sort of emit that energy, I believe is very, very cool and part of a larger conversation about like what is the power and the role of an individual in a community or in a society. And we talked a little bit about spirituality and faith and religion, but now thinking in terms of like the day-to-day, you said, was it the effective altruism?
Yes, yeah.
Effective altruism and sort of different ways of either seeing what you can provide to a community and measuring that against how you can benefit from it is very interesting. And I think each person has a different journey with it. And I know, the way I apply a lot of these things when it comes to like art, for example, is I have sort of 3 principles when it comes to art that I measure, which is, is the art made with generosity, clarity, and purpose. And I find I came up with those 3 words a long time ago, and every single time they sort of stood the test of time for me, at least as a metric of when looking at a piece of art or a piece of theater or listen to a song, I'm able to sort of identify those 3 principles, and that helps me inform whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
And so now shifting, because your progression as a writer, and the way you even use that in your example of how you can, be effectively altruistic and attaining success and then giving back in that way versus how to do it in a day-to-day way today. So what do you think ultimately is the role of an individual in the art world, especially as a writer? Do you find that you're able to be equally, self-reflecting and altruistic in a way that you want to be?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I'll say, just in coming back to effective altruism as a concept quickly, I say the ideal example when it comes to effective altruism and explaining just the underlying philosophy of it is, you hear about trips that say like a group of people, a community, like a church would take to another country, and they get there and they like build a bridge that this community needs. Now, to get there, you spent you paid airfare to get to this country. There are expenses associated with you going to this country. There's food, there's all sorts of things. And you built that bridge, and that's great. The effective altruism approach to that would be stay home and send the money. There's labor power in this country already.
Right.
You going there, there's an emotional benefit to that for you. But if you sent the money, there would be a net better outcome for that community. Yeah. Now, as far as applying effective altruism to work, it's funny you mentioned the ways in which you appraise art. I think for me, as someone that has no art history knowledge, the way in which I tend to look at art and value art would be along 3 criteria. One is just in immediately observing this thing, do I inherently see the value in it? Is it aesthetically pleasing to me in some way? 2 would be, is it clear to me that a lot of work went into this? Like, like even if it's not like, beautiful to me, but if you put together like, 10,000 soda tabs, like I'm like, that guy put in a lot of work. And 3 would be, does it feel personal? Is it trying to communicate like, an emotion, something that I can relate to, or at least like recognize and, and derive something from? And so as a writer, I have heavily leaned in the last few years in the direction of trying to write things that feel honest and things that allow me to process and express something that I'm like working out. And I hesitate to call that altruistic. if anything, feels I hesitate to assign negative words to it too, but it to me it's maybe closer to selfish or self-indulgent than it is altruistic. You know, it's me trying to work through this thing and trying to express something honest because I do feel that at the end of the day, given how much there is out there for people to consume and how little of it feels actually honest or how little of it, you know, hits you emotionally, that I would rather be creating things that hit you emotionally even if you don't have the exact experience that I have had in writing it. And in general, I just kind of, you know, find myself in this spot of, for any movie to get made or for any TV show to get made, hundreds of people have to work on it. If it's a large scale thing, millions of dollars are going to be spent on it. And for me, it's how do I justify asking hundreds of people to work on something and millions of dollars to be spent on something if it's not worthwhile? And so the only way for it to be worthwhile, as far as I'm concerned, is for it to be honest, for it to be something that, you know, communicates a piece of your humanity into the world in hopes that other people can resonate with that.
Who you're doing it for and who you're doing it with, that
Yeah.
also matters.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, at least in Hollywood, like this is a business, right?
Yeah.
The people that are spending the millions of dollars to make this thing are doing that so that they can make more millions of dollars than they spent, you know?
Yes.
And so a lot of things get made that aren't honest or, I mean, by my definition, worthwhile, because the people that are spending this money believe that they will make more money off it. That is their goal. But as a viewer, as someone that was drawn to this industry because of the way it made me feel, if a movie or a TV show doesn't make you feel something, then a lot of time and money has been wasted. And so at the end of the day, I'm writing stuff that I hope will make people feel something, because I have had the experience a lot of times, and I think we all have, if I've sat through a movie, I've, you know, left my house, I've paid for parking, I've done the entire process of, I've spent, you know, a few hours of my life investing myself in something, and I walk out of the theater and it's like, well, that was kind of a waste of my time. But I've also walked out of movies where it's like, I don't even know that I would recommend this movie to someone. I don't know that I ever have to see this movie again, but it made me feel something, you know? And that feels worthwhile. I feel like I got my money's worth out of it.
Yeah. What are some of your, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but going back to like movies that you love and movies that have made you feel something,
Sure.
how do you decide what your favorite movies are?
Yeah.
Because I know The Lobster is
Yeah.
one of them.
Yeah.
And I remember when you first told me that, it was the first time I'd heard of a new movie entering someone's favorite films list.
Yeah.
Because usually someone's favorite movies are like things, you know, oh, watched it as a kid in the 90s, or like 16 Candles, or like, you know,
Yeah.
like sort of odd movies. But for the more recent the movie, the more impressed I am when it's someone's favorite. And
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, I know there's a Lobster, but how do you decide when a movie has entered that list?
Yeah. And I think the criteria, even if it is a movie like 16 Candles, it's that it made you feel something that was so significant that it holds a place in your memory. And so with a movie like, you know, like 16 Candles, it's like you forever, for the rest of your life, you're going to remember how you felt when you saw that movie for the first time. And you're going to get to revisit that feeling every time you rewatch the movie. With The Lobster, I think what hit me about it was it changed what I realized was possible with movies, and I guess with comedies in particular. It's a dark comedy, and it's taking a really weird and abstract idea, playing it completely straight. Throughout the movie, everyone's taking it entirely seriously. You have this bizarre concept, but everything that happens in this world is entirely grounded given the bizarre concept. And that makes for really funny comedy. And I think maybe this is also the part of, it hits the part of my brain that really enjoys the logic of constructing a world. And so this is a really bizarre world, but it is constructed in a way that is so airtight where it's like the logic of it is just perfect. And so both as a fan of comedy, as a fan of bizarre comedy, and as someone that can appreciate just the degree of like fastidiousness that goes into creating such an airtight world, it hits all my buttons. And my writing has changed since I watched The Lobster, and so that's why it makes that cut of, The Lobster and Get Out are my favorite movies, and I hesitate to choose which one is top billing. But both of those movies, after I watched that, I was like, oh, it's possible to do this. I'm gonna try something like that, my version of that, based on my experiences.
What was that? Well, what was the equivalent of that experience with Get Out?
Mm. Um, I think, and I'm trying to, I don't have like a great, I don't have a great memory. I don't have a great recollection of history, but when Get Out came out, it was, to my knowledge, one of the, or at least of the films that I'd seen, one of the first attempts to have a discussion about race, but set in a genre, set in the context of like this like thriller, this borderline like horror film. And again, it was entirely grounded. There's this family that has this ability to essentially steal black people's bodies and trap their subconsciouses within their bodies. But everything else that happened in that film was entirely grounded. And a thing that I think made that movie so good is the fact that Jordan Peele, who is biracial, uh, in his depiction of that white family of what's her name, Allison Williams,
Mm-hmm.
Of her character's family, it's not. They felt like a real family to me. They didn't feel like him trying to take a shot at like, look at how terrible white people are. It's like this is a real liberal family presented as like a bunch of liberals with like good intentions. And so when that twist happens, it really hits you in a way that if it was set up as like, if it was set up in such a way that from the beginning this white family is like antagonistic and they embody all the traits of like American racism in an unsubtle way, when that twist happened it wouldn't have been as effective.
Yeah, and stylistically, of course. I mean, so many of the visual components and the way he's done the pacing and the tempo and the humor. It really is a great movie, and it challenged, I think, a lot of on a superficial note, it sort of challenged the illusion of racism as being something that you can trace to a certain type of white person.
Yes. Yeah.
The red, sweaty racism. that was not these people.
Yeah.
And it's a much more arguably unsettling, untraceable, or undetectable
Yes.
Racism, where it's much more possessive, and it's more human in how they're motivated by jealousy and envy.
Yeah.
Of, oh, what a great black body.
Yeah.
Like, that must be mine.
Yeah.
I must take that from you.
Yeah.
That was the cool thing that I'd never ever seen presented in such a striking way.
Yeah.
Of the possessiveness, and that is a weighty word when it comes to the subject of race in America.
Especially in America. I mean, to your point, or something that you touched on in that is just how authentic that family felt. I mean, up until the exact moment when, you find out that they're doing this thing that isn't physically possible in our world.
Yes.
But how authentic they felt leading up to that and coming back to this place of honesty where it's like, if it was a cartoonishly racist family,
Mhm.
that movie wouldn't have resonated with us as strongly. But he showed us an honest depiction of, we were led to believe for the first half of the movie, well-intentioned liberal white people. And so when he pulled the rug out from under us, it was that much more powerful and that much more resonant.
Yeah.
And I do think, yeah, I don't think it's going out on too far of a limb to say that his ability to write that authentic depiction of that white family is probably rooted in the fact that half his family is white and his wife is white.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, I was always, even when they were doing Key and Peele,
Mhm.
him and Keegan Michael Key, were you could see that when they would do a Halloween episode,
Mhm.
Jordan Peele's talent and flair for horror really
Yeah.
rang true in those horror comedy sketches. I mean, I marvel at Key and Peele.
Yeah.
I think they are among the most I think their impact on sketch comedy
Mhm.
and naturalistically acted sketch comedy,
Yeah.
and how the way they abstracted who can play what race,
Mhm.
and find authenticity and naturalistic acting within it.
Mhm.
I think that is like they really are masters
Absolutely.
and not just the writing but the performing and the presentation of it.
Yeah. And that it's funny you should mention how well done their Halloween episodes are. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda is a great example of this. And in general, whenever you see this, it's a really powerful thing. So, for instance, with Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's an incredible rapper, but does not look like a rapper and was, I would imagine, unlikely to have a successful career as a rapper if that's what he decided he wanted to do for a living. He is interested in history, or at the very least was interested in the history of like Alexander Hamilton. And he has like a background in theater. And he created Hamilton, which is I mean, I don't know. One of the best pieces of media that has come out I haven't consumed stuff from 50 years ago, so I don't want to be too grandiose in my
Yeah.
pronouncement.
Yeah.
But one of the best pieces of media, certainly in my lifetime.
I agree.
And that is because it is a combination of these really weird elements that came together in Lin-Manuel Miranda. And so, as an artist, I think we should all be seeking to create things essentially that only we could create. Discovering the things that make you unique in your perspective, based on your biography, based on your interest, putting all those things together and generating an output that is the result of those things, I think creates for something really special. And so, whenever you see that, whenever you see Jordan Peele taking his I would imagine, struggle with racial identity over the course of his life growing up interracial. The fact that he has this like incredible fondness for, let's say, like the work of Ira Levin, which he has said is like directly related to Get Out. And yeah, just combining all these elements, like his appreciation of like horror, combining all those things and generating something that only you could create and something that feels honest, that really, really resonates with people. So as artists, I think that that's what we should all be trying to do.
Definitely. And I think there's also a two-pronged component to it where one is that's why I believe in expanding your worldview. Like, like meeting people who don't think like you, traveling to places that, that's why I'm a big Anthony Bourdain fan, going to parts unknown and sort of adding to, your way of looking at humans in the world, especially as an artist. And the other side to it is skills. Taking the time to improve your actual craft.
Yeah.
So that when preparation meets opportunity, you are able to communicate bigger ideas that only you could create.
Yes.
And demonstrating a skill set that only you have obtained.
Yeah.
So it's kind of winding down a bit, but I want to hear more sort of like at this stage right now,
Hmm.
how are you finding your journey as a writer, as an artist? Navigating the business components, the show
Sure.
components, the personal components.
Hmm.
The role of the individual and you. How are things going in all of that in that regard?
Yeah. So I've worked on 7 seasons of television now. As of last year, I had been on the same show for 3 seasons and really felt like I grew up as a writer. It was sort of like writing college for me. Like I became a significantly better writer doing that. My skill set improved working on that show. And in the aftermath of that, I had an opportunity to work on a show created by my old boss. And at various points, I've been approached with opportunities to create things that had varying levels of interest or varying levels of were promising to me to varying degrees. I've decided to take the last year off to work on writing my own feature script, and that is not the most financially prudent decision to make. But I do know that that decision is motivated by this intention to create something that feels like an honest depiction, not only of my perspective and my background and all these things, that inform my voice, but also, what was the second prong you gave?
Skill set.
My skill set. I'm at this point where I feel like, you know what, I think I'm pretty good at this. I think I've gotten to this point where I believe, and I'm humbled every draft, but I believe that I can communicate what is in my head onto paper with little loss.
Wow.
I can get from what is in, I can get from what I'm thinking to like having that vision be something that you can read and see what was in my head without a lot of loss. And that it feels really good.
That's
And
great.
I want to take a step back and say that like I know that I'm going to continue to grow as a writer as time goes on, and I'm looking forward to growing as a writer as time goes on. And so, there's probably more loss now than I acknowledge and realize, and over the course of time I can shrink that bit, but certainly more so than at any point in my career. I feel more confident in my ability to communicate what is up here to you as clearly as possible. As clearly as, not as clearly as possible, because as time goes on, I'll get better at it. But certainly with a greater degree of clarity than at any point in my life leading up to this. And that it feels good. And so I've taken this last year to put something out there that I think is uniquely me and that represents what I'm capable of as a writer right now. And it has meant not making money for a really long period of time. But, at the end of the day, I didn't get into this to make money, And it's easy to lose sight of that when people keep trying to throw money at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all very cool, and it's a common thread that I also notice and admire with friends who are filmmakers or whatever. A lot, especially as a director, for example, needing to communicate what is in your head and choosing which medium that will be your communication tool.
Hmm.
When I talked to my dad, for a while his was painting.
Yeah.
Communicating ideas and with clarity in painting. With my friend who's a filmmaker, it was like communicating through, how do you tell dozens of people your idea and have them each do a different job that correlates to it. And with you, it's scripts.
Yeah.
And ideas and the page is the thing.
Yeah.
The word is the thing. Well, very cool. It's all very inspiring, man, and I'm very glad you stopped by. So
thank you for having me, man. This was amazing.
And keep it. Hope to have you back to hear more about what you're up to.
Please, I love that. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.